Hi folks, this video has been made in response to the two big events in Australian football over the last week or so, the movement of the grand final to Sydney for the next 3 years and the victory violence. I don't think these issues are the biggest issues in Australian football, but rather symptoms and things that we can solve with the plan I've come up with here. I've only really thought about this in the last day or two, so these aren't perfect plans, but rather just sketches for what I believe would actually fix Australian football for the long term. Because there's this great idea that we had to carry the momentum of a World Cup into football, you know, that great feeling from like the scenes of Federation Square and the like, and carry it into Australian football, but that's not really how it works. You need to build momentum, you're not just carrying it. So instead, what I'm looking at here to fix these issues are the two ones that really come up a lot when people say what's wrong with the game. I think one, junior football is far too expensive to play, and two, academies cost so much and are so time consuming, they only really allow a certain type of player to get through, and you're not necessarily getting the best talent through. So my big idea originally that starts everything and will eventually work, I think, to solve problems even as big as fixing the A-League, is we scrap the academy systems outright. So every A-League club's academy is gone. I have plans for that will solve that problem, the problem that will create, and instead what we have is all the players that were in these academies go back and they play for their local clubs. First divisions at local clubs across the country stress the importance of being professional. They train 3 times a week. That gets scaled down, you go down lower, there are still fun leagues for kids to play in, but that first level is still a very high standard, still has all the ideas of academy football, but instead it's just at your local scene. From that, I want it split into districts, and Football Australia and Australian football, the federations involved at the state level will have academies for each region. These will be funded by these federations. And what will happen is, after each regular season's played, players from each of these clubs, I'd say at least a minimum of 3 from each club in the league, the players will go into these academies. These academies will be run over the summer. The players will train in these academies. If they want friendlies like they currently do with academies, they can have them through the summer. But the big idea is these academies run, and in January they play each other in a state competition, which still gives like a round robin style competition, which still gives scouts the opportunity to see these players, gives them a chance to test their abilities at the best of the best, but they're still playing every game they need to be playing at a club level, and it doesn't fully wreck that system. Then my idea from that is how talent gets funneled into the A-League. I believe we instead create a draft system. It becomes open from when you can be eligible from when you're like 15 years and 9 months. I'd say that would be only the exceptional players that can do that. But you can be eligible from say 16 through to 18 or 19. You make yourself eligible and you can be selected by an A-League club. This one fixes the distribution of players problem. A lot of the clubs that can't create juniors will get given a chance with juniors by this very system. But two, it also keeps these guys playing at reasonable levels and keeps the standard of local football at a much higher level for much longer. As well as this, the coaches from the academies that have been disbanded will be welcomed into these academies, and I've got other plans for these academies that'll come up a bit later. But the general idea too is, and some clubs will complain, we create local players, and what's the incentive of helping that now that we're not going to get them? I believe you'd have a loading point system where you get say 250 points a season, and if you have a local player you want to get in the draft, if they're in like a second or third round, it costs 100 or 200 points, but if they're a top 10 pick, it costs like 300 points. The first season you can borrow points from the second season, but after that you've just got to bank them and use them responsibly. And that way, it's only a first contract anyway. If they're local players and they mean so much to the area, they'll come back. But otherwise, the system basically sorts itself out. Now, I think financially, I don't really have an answer at this point, like how to lower the funds, but I think directing all this pressure into making local football much better will sort of naturally sort out the costs. I think with having more involved, costs will be able to lower, facilities will continue to get updated as more funds come through, more people are involved. I think up until the 18s we had the system as it is, it keeps players in, but then we have to really look at keeping players, as that's another retention age that we have problems with. The serious players that aren't going to make the A-League, we still keep that serious club level continuing through. Obviously there should be more levels of it now, that there isn't so much of a distribution of talent going to meaningless academies and stuff, so they should still be at the clubs, so they won't be lost to the clubs. But then also I think clubs should set up in population dense places. They set up like a jumpers for goalpost league where 5 or 6 teams play each other every week at a much lower level, not stressed about the rules. It's actually just there for fun. And if it's a more regional area with less people, then it'll be club against club, that kind of thing. And then with stressing the involvement of having clubs, so they do it in Melbourne and Sydney to an extent, but not so much in other places. Have clubs actually create like a league club kind of place where there can be meals and drinks and stuff without pokies and crap like that, and actually have it funneling money into the clubs and actually start to develop these clubs and bring them along as they deserve to, and have them be part of the community. Into the 30s, you can continue these fun comps and your over 35s as you would naturally. That can still continue. This has already been established at a lot of clubs, but walking football could happen to keep even more. I've seen over 65s of that in England and stuff. So walking football can continue to keep people at a club for their lives, and that'd be a wonderful thing to do. We've got to look at other options as well, like the country's got like an obesity crisis, as some would label it. These academies, when they're not working as academies or just in the down times, they can run programs, and I know rugby league clubs do this, where people can get nutrition advice, exercise advice for a basic cost from people that are qualified to do it within these academies. And you can have light exercise activities involving footballs to also encourage that as well. And it might be a sneaky way, hey, I'm fit now, what should I do? Oh, I'll go play football. There's an idea, there's more people involved. Clubs should still continue while this is going to invite refugees and immigrants into clubs. LGBT community will be heavily involved as well, and of course the Indigenous community, and how that suits clubs. That won't be a one size fits all approach. People with different abilities, where the facilities can be created, allowing disabled football to continue in these areas as well. Of course, the academy system and drafting system, I think this applies to women as well. That's why I haven't mentioned them. I don't think that should be any different. It should be the exact same program running through there. So I think that's how you fix that to an extent. You look at how you can involve more people in the game, get more people in the game. I think people that don't support sport in general, you might get some of them through this community event, but they shouldn't be your focus, because in general, if they don't follow sport and there's no reason for them to follow sport, then they're probably not going to. I think showing the benefits of community and things like this definitely help that. But they shouldn't be what you spend your money on. Weirdly, it's the group that people want to help the least. I'd say is the actual group we need to target. And I would start an advertising campaign, because if we develop this, because we need more coaches, we need more people involved in staff and even players. It's what A-League people would term as Euro snobs. Now, they're not super popular amongst this community, but they are actually probably the actual converts that are probably lifelong converts if you can get them there. So my advertising campaign would involve, you think you're better than us basically, come and show us how good you are, come and coach this team, come and ref this, come and play here, make this game better and make it what you want it to be, and have incentives, have like a football manager system where it's like, you take over a club and you're competing against other people that have done this. You say what you support and how long you supported other teams, and there'd be like a loading points in and see how you go in the competition. And if you prove you're the best manager, you get some prizes or something. But get people actively encouraged to try and show what they can do in football, because we need everyone we can get to make the game better in that respect. So I think that this system isn't fully developed by me yet, and I wouldn't fully understand how we could get more staff people involved and but I think that's a good start. Obviously, the academies will keep on people, and I think it's a real good pathway for retired A-League players as something to go into as well. Are these academy programs, and it actually is an effective system for these people to work in. I'm not saying coaching badges are hard to get now, but there's certainly something where you might have to feel part of a club to go and do. Whereas I think these academy bases could become the basis for that. And instead, this is where you go to do it, and this is where you get to, even if you don't want to do them, here's an experience where you can see what it's actually like, and then if you feel comfortable, then you can go on with it. I also think the summer provides a good opportunity for the best coaches from the local system. Here you work on this week, you can get an experience what it's like to work at the next level and be rewarded for your efforts throughout the year, and actually get to show the abilities you have, because I think we have some wonderful people involved in the game throughout, and they don't always get the best chance because maybe they're at a club that just doesn't have the talent or doesn't have the resources. People see it, and everyone knows coaches that actually believe they do a good job, and that's a way to show that ability and recognise ideas and thoughts and promote them in the game. My next thing from the game, that's basically my idea for youth and bringing back people. Obviously, I think, as I said, the finances should be dealt with that. As we build a community, things should be able to get cheaper as we get more people in, as we retain people and have real support. And I think sponsors become easier to keep, and even government funding becomes easier to get as we do better with that. The next thing on is crowd behaviour. The scenes from the victory on Saturday were not good, and violence towards players is just a massive no, and the guy should be out of football for a long time. People make mistakes, but you also have to pay the price for said mistakes and learn from them. But I think the way we actually solve these things in the long term, obviously, and how that youth development gets people into the A-League, is you get a real attachment to what football means to people. These people might not go from their community clubs that they've been supporting really well to the A-League, but as you develop this, and as the draft gets people that they know involved in the leagues and stuff, people will actually develop the connection with A-League that's been sought after since it's begun. And it did have that support originally, but it just didn't. They didn't form a bond, and this is how you do it. By having actual roots. You don't have to actually know players, but if they come from the region constantly and that connection continues to be formed and it's actually a meaningful connection, that's how you do it. Along that lines, the respect from the point I was getting to with the respect and crowd behaviour, I think what I see a lot, and it's not bagging them, but a lot of active support, it doesn't tend to age up, it ages out. Like, you don't really see too many older people, and that's not necessarily the case in the support groups they're emulating. Like, they're definitely always unhinged people generally at these other the people they're emulating, but you don't see many senior members of these groups, or if you do, they're not taking responsibility enough. I think there has to be a real respect of the club you support. You support this club, and by doing stuff like you're doing, you're putting the game in a bad spot, but you're putting your club in a terrible spot. You're costing your club points, and that's not active support. That's costing your team. And if that doesn't work enough, I think the leaders have to deal in threats that these people know and say, hey, you gave that guy 3 stitches, we'll give you something worse if you continue to, if you are to do that for our club. Like, make it known what it means to do these stupid things. And there'll still be mistakes from time to time, but I think if everyone actually knows what it means to support your club and what it means to be a part of it and how bad it would be to be excluded from said club, you won't see it as often. I also think as the game grows more, if it were to grow more with the community aspect and stuff, I don't think people would be so open to acting like idiots if they knew every single person would always see their actions immediately. Obviously, the one on the weekend was seen pretty quickly by everyone, but if you just to do small stupid stuff, when there's everyone that you know at a game, you're probably less likely to do it even if you are pissed. It's just not going to happen as often. And just a quick thought on that as well, along the journalism and reporting on these sorts of things, if reporters are actively just reporting the facts, even if I know media definitely uses it as a good way to slur soccer, if they're just actively doing that, just reporting the facts, even with a bad headline, you kind of got to let it go. It is what it is. Every sport has that. You have to cop that. Okay, it's not great, but it is what it is. That's fine. I do actually hate how they label it as an Australian football thing, rather than like if AFL problems happen or NRL problems happen, it's the Magpies or the Bulldogs that have done this or that. It's not, Australian Rugby League or AFL that's done this. That bugs me. But I'd also say that these so-called journalists that write glorified gossip columns, they'd be doing a big service to call them gossip columns. Never worth giving the time of day if all they're saying is this game's not worth it because it did this, because every game's done something stupid. Okay, it's not this precise thing, but there's so many things to be embarrassed about. And these people are a discredit to the sports they report on constantly themselves. I follow these sports as well. They're idiots in them sports. If you can think of a journalist I'm talking about, then that's probably one of them, because they're obvious. People know they're idiots. Their time's coming up and they just disrupt and cause hate and distrust amongst the community and amongst sports that just shouldn't be there, all because they want to sell a newspaper. I'm glad their time's coming up, and don't give time to the people that are even worse, that just comment on these things like, oh, that sport's stupid bunch of thugs, or that's, and it happens in all sports. And I think them people, the best thing that could happen to them is public castration, and we should just ignore them totally. On a last point, as I am getting a bit long-winded here, is the Australian football side of things. Obviously, the grand final decision, not great. I actually think if they just decided to do a grand final in a different city every year, still have your grand final week, but have it in a different city every year, and you've got to bid on it openly, and it does change every year, then I think that's probably not so bad. Like, yeah, you don't get your Adelaide, Perth or Brisbane grand finals that you did, but I think we've also been lucky to avoid some poor ones as well. But at the same time, it does still open the game up to everyone. I think it was always kind of a downside. You couldn't book in advance your tickets to a hotel to the game. I think that kind of thing can definitely be a benefit, and the finance to the game in that aspect, as well as still growing the game, would be great. What they've done, it doesn't really fit that quite as well. Another point too is, could we at least make sure we get expansion right at the next time, and be for someone that actually wants teams, and that absolutely has to be right this time around. You would have thought, they won't now because of the teams, but Wollongong and Canberra would have been like near certainties because of their stadiums, prior support and ability to create a team. That's not happening. I even think they just don't put enough risk in. Like, they've done odd risks. Like before the NBL game, they could have been the first people to put a team in Tasmania. I know the stadium didn't exist, that they'd really want to play it, but really, that's a problem for some of the teams they picked. They could have been the first to do it and be innovative. You even could have put a team in Northern Territory and say, they wouldn't have the fans or finances. There's teams in the league now that do that. So I think they had to be more bold with their decisions. I know why they did it. It was interest, self-interest, but you got to be better than that. And finally on that, I think if people are leaving the sport because of the people at the top showing corporate interests, self-interest, or the interests of governments or their friends in high places, then guess what? You're not really going to ever be able to follow a sport, because that happens in every sport. It definitely has happened in Australian football, but it happens in every sport. Sure, challenge decisions, absolutely. But if you're going to say, I'm never going to follow a sport because this has happened, well, guess what? It happens in every sport. So grow up, be angry and show your taste with the decision. But, if you're leaving the game because of that, why were you following the game in the first place? There's a lot of bad decisions in a row, but that happens in a lot of sports. Grow up. And finally, I think the thing that sums up Australian football the most at the moment is just the Socceroos, that last World Cup run. No one believed in them. I think no one rated them, absolutely, despite the best efforts of the players and staff, and they somehow still got further than anyone expected, and no one really knows how. And I think that's symptomatic of where football's at these days. Just imagine in 2 more World Cups time, we have players actually established, like 3 or 4 players established from that system we create now. They're starting, and we have 3 and 4 quals off the bench ready to fire up and put belief in this team. I mean, can you imagine that? You don't carry momentum, you build momentum.